I'm very curious to see what this is, Gabe. You've piqued my interest.
To see if I know what it's about. Because sometimes I don't understand, so I'm excited.
Just watch it be so obscure. It's like fucking Linguini and that chick from
Ratatouille. It is
Luigi.
It is not obscure in the slightest.
Okay.
With such a mystery, can we really pull any punches with the guesses? It could be anything.
Is it the bee and the lady from the Bee movie?
That's not questionably canon. That is canon. They fucked. We all know it.
They're an important part of people's breakfast.
Here's the thing about sex in fiction. You don't need to have a fucking sex scene.
I can't stand those books. They make me so mad.
I can't replace a fire alarm on my own.
Save your morning routine.
Lemonade across my bed.
An unexpected pregnancy. Now baby just...
Like, who's your mommy?
Hello, everybody. My name is Dean, and welcome back to the InkGuild Podcast. Tonight, we have Alex.
Hello.
Gabe.
Hello.
And Maddie.
Hi, everyone.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about romance stories with such a obvious plethora of shit that we can talk about. We've decided to make it so that we each share at least two things between three different topics. Romance stories, which will be part one, which includes just about any kind of romance arc from, movies, TV shows, video games, whatever. After that, we're going to be talking, we're going to be going into part two, which will talk about romance tropes, specifically any kind of, tropes or dynamics associated with romance stories. It doesn't have to be exclusively romance stories because they seem to be applied in every kind of dynamic. But once we're done with that, at the heart of romance stories, obviously, is two people. So then we're going to be talking about our favorite ships. Again, also can be included, or they could also be from whichever kind of form there is. So there's, books, movies, TV shows, whichever one. And after that, once we're done, we're going to save our final discussion for our own ships, actually. And I think that's it. How did I do explaining that, guys?
I think pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because just for some context, it took us almost 10 minutes trying to figure this out beforehand, and I was the one who had to organize the topic, and I just made everything a whole lot more confusing. It's great podcast host here, guys.
We're like, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. If you were expecting some kind of organization and structure, get the fuck out. That's gonna turn off so many people. I'm so sorry. All right. So before we get into part one, which is talking about romance stories, first let's acknowledge the obvious ships that we can't really talk about, or we didn't have time to talk about. And I think I'll actually let Alex go first. So she'll mention her first one, and then Gabe will go next, Maddie will go, and then I will close off the honorable mentions.
Okay. My honorable mention is Wolfstar from Harry Potter. That's Sirius Black and Remus Lupin. I don't really know how to expand on it. I've just they should have been canon, but you know who is a coward.
She's a lot more than a coward.
She is a lot more than a coward, but she is a coward.
Yeah. Okay. Let's stop with the not Hatsune Miku trashing for now. We can have a whole separate episode on that. Gabe, how about you? Honorable mention.
Yeah, my first honorable mention is also a cowardly one. Storm pilot from the Star Wars trilogy, from the Star Wars sequel trilogy with Finn and Poe.
Fair enough.
Fair,
Very
fair.
fair.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot in our queer episode, but it just really drove home. I was talking about it with a friend recently. It just really drives home that Finn was set up to be a rogue stormtrooper who fell in love with a rebel and became a Jedi, and we were fucking robbed of that
We were
Because of
robbed that.
cowardice.
because of sheer cowardice.
Fucking Disney. All right, well, that's gonna get clipped, and I'll never get to work with Disney again. But you know what? Fuck it. So you said you had a second. You said that was your first one. Do you have another one then?
For
Honorable mentions.
honorable mentions, no, I don't know. No.
Okay. Moving on to Maddie then. What would your honorable mention be?
Mine would be from the TV series Once Upon a Time. I love Emma Swan and Hook. I just can't get enough of them. That's who I ship.
Nice.
They're pretty cute. I'll let that one pass.
I got the seal of approval over here.
Thanks, Alex. That matters so much.
I'm joking. No, I'm just also acknowledging that I also enjoy that ship.
All right.
Oh, I'm glad.
Nice. All right. Well, then my honorable mention is Ellie and Dina from The Last of Us Part 2. I mean, like, it wasn't Ellie and... Fuck, I forgot what her name was from Left Behind, but yeah, Ellie and Dina have a good relationship in...
Riley, I think.
Riley? Okay,
Riley?
so, yeah, so it was... I much prefer Ellie and Riley, but Ellie and Dina have a pretty good dynamic, and like, yeah, with honorable mentions out of the way, let's now get into part 1, where we'll be talking about, I guess, romance stories. And my first pick for this discussion is a movie that was released some time ago, based off the novelization of, oh my god, what the hell am I trying to say? Okay, I'm doing that again. My first pick for part 1 is Crazy Rich Asians, which was most people are familiar with it being a movie now, but originally it was a novel, and basically it's I don't want to say it's the Great Gatsby, the Great Gatsby set in Asia, because it's not, but like basically there is a I really can't remember anything about this movie now that I think about it, but all I remember is that like the one thing, it is very much like the billionaire son meets a humble girl from kind of out of nowhere, or like kind of from out of nowhere and seemingly from nowhere to begin with. I remember Constance Wu was the female love interest and Henry Golding was the male love interest, and I'll be referring to them by their actual names because I do not remember their character names whatsoever. But anyway,
Rachel and Nick.
thank you.
Yep.
So from the thing is about Crazy Rich Asians, right? Like, I more or less love the dynamic between the two of them, but I'll get to that in a second. But ultimately, what Crazy Rich Asians means to me at the time is like, hey, Asian representation in movies that isn't super fucking racist. That's a good start.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's a very colorful, expressive movie that is super important in terms of like getting or moving us forward to like, not being comically or not being portrayed as comically racist in the media, and that's great. But aside from that, Rachel and Nick's dynamic is it's very reminiscent of like, like Ed said, the billionaire playboy and then the seemingly from out of nowhere type. Like, the guy is like, I'll give Nick's character like a lot of like humility, I guess. Like, he's very kind towards Rachel, and Rachel herself, like, she does have a lot of spine to her. So that makes for a very good dynamic, but at the same time, like, I think Constance Wu and Henry Golding just have a really good relationship, and that's what makes that's just what makes following their relationship throughout the movie very fun. right? Like, how does Rachel deal with the fact that Nick's family is like super fucking rich and unapproving of her at all? Like, it's a classic dynamic, and I loved watching that on screen. And with Nick too, it's like he seems to be very content, or he seems to be very happy with Rachel. So it's like, how do I get my family off my back? Like, it's a fun movie, and I think I definitely do need to rewatch it now. But like, yeah, it's a very important, I think, romance story, because not only is the fact that like it's not being stereotyped that is important for the Asian community, but it's also like, just, you know, there's a good change in the dynamic, I guess. Like, the guy is not being overtly pervy and you know, very advancing with his status as some other billionaire stories have. And
we're all thinking it, aren't we?
probably.
Yes.
Yeah. So on the flip side of that, Rachel's character, or Constance Wu's character Rachel, does have like a lot of like independence and spine to her, like I said. So with that dynamic in mind, it's always like, it was fun keeping up with their thing, but I guess I already said that. Have you guys seen Crazy Rich Asians, or like, have you guys, like, you know, have you watched the movie, read the book, and then what do you guys think on Rachel and Nick's relationship?
I've only ever seen the movie. I did not read the book. Despite
I
years
have
working on
not
it.
seen the movie, but it's like really high on my to watch list.
Maddie, how about you?
It is very good. Yeah, it's good. And I wanted to add to your point about Rachel's character. I really don't like how in romance novels like this, where a billionaire male is pursuing like a young female, like, who's not totally set in her ways, they seem to always paint the female as just like, they're trying to paint her as strong, but she's not coming across that way. She's just coming across as very like whiny and give me more attention until I decide what I want. And I just really appreciated that Rachel's character wasn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, she's a professor. She has her career. She knew what she wanted. And it was kind of like Nick came in and changed that. And I appreciated that that's how it came across, at least to me as the audience.
Yeah. And, you know, compliment, or adding more onto that, like, there was still enough vulnerability and worry with Rachel to make her a very well-rounded character and love interest. Mm-hmm. Like, if she, like, it's one thing to be like a very whiny love interest, and then there's like also the very like standoffish love interest that's like, you know, at the very last second, then okay, fine, I'll settle or something. But like, yeah, I just think it's like thing. It's a nice like rounding between Rachel and Nick. They're very well-rounded love interests, and I really am glad for that, because if it had just been two archetypes, but just with you know, just coming from my, like, you know, coming from my community, and granted, obviously I'm Filipino, I'm not Chinese, but I think because of its place and significance, it was important to have good characters above good representation, and I'm glad that Crazy Rich Asians movie-wise did both.
Mm-hmm. It was very charming, and I agree, not that I have much of a leg to stand on in this conversation, but I did think that it was very well done in portraying Asian culture, and especially in American or North American media. It was very tasteful.
Yeah. Lots of beautiful colors, lots of good sights to see.
Oh, it was so vibrant. Very vibrant picture. It was so beautiful, just as a piece of artwork.
Yeah, and like interacting with friends and stuff, like it's great. But I think let's not spend too much time on that, because we have a lot to talk about. So I'll give it off to Alex for her first pick on her favorite story, or on her favorite love story.
Great. My first pick is a novel called Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by, I'm gonna butcher his name because I don't speak Spanish, Benjamin Alirsain. It's like kind of a historical romance. It takes place in the 80s, I believe. And it follows these two boys, Aristotle and Dante, and they're two Mexican-American boys living in the States with their families. They meet at a swimming pool, become really close friends, and then at the end of the book, they realize, well, Dante, who's the POV character, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I read this book. But yeah, Dante, who's the POV character, realizes that he's in love with Ari, and they end up together. It's like it is a romance, but it's also very much a book about like self-reflection, and like understanding yourself, or in the main character coming to understand himself, and goes on like a big journey of self-discovery. It's a really, really beautiful book. I recommend it to literally everyone. I love it so much. And it's just like the characters are really sweet. They're both very complicated. They also, like I said, they're Mexican American. They come from kind of a community I feel that you don't see a lot of in like mainstream media. But yeah, it's a beautiful book about like self-reflection and learning about yourself and learning to love in general. I don't really know what else to say about it.
Well, I guess we can just like talk about like some of the background information. So like, when did you get your hands on this book?
I was in high school. There's also, I think this book was released in 2012, I think. And it was originally written in Spanish, and then translated into English. And there's a sequel in the works that was supposed to come out at some point in the hopefully near future that I'm very much looking forward to. But it's like, and I'll talk about this more later, but I've always been like a huge fan of like friends into lovers. That's like a trope that I really like, and this definitely has that like really well. And it's also kind of a coming of age story because they're both like teenagers, kind of hitting that point of like adulthood, and they're realizing other feelings about each other, and then also dealing with like family issues and stuff. Yeah, it's beautiful. Please read this book.
Do you want to restate the name?
My list.
Oh, sorry, Maddie. What was that?
I said as she was saying, like giving background information, I put it on the list of things to read.
Yeah, it's called Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. It's a very, very long title. In the fandom, it's usually just shortened to Ari and Dante.
Is there there's a fandom. What's the fandom?
It's pretty small. I haven't interacted with it too much. It's just like a bit of art and stuff that I've seen, at least.
Oh, that's cute.
But yeah, it's also been nominated for like my cover of the book has like 4 like tokens on it. Like it's been nominated for so many awards. It's a beautiful book.
Cool.
Highly recommend it.
All right. Well then, if you've got nothing else to add on to that, then we can move on to Gabe.
Yeah.
All right. Gabe.
So, like I said, I haven't really interacted with a lot of like the actual romance genre. So both my picks are going to be like subplots from outside of the romance genre. But the first pick is from an anime I've talked about a few times on this channel called Bakuno. Involving a character I've talked about a couple times on the channel called Vino. For those who remember from my favorite characters episode, Vino, I am absolutely in love with this man. Vino's a character he's essentially an assassin for the mafia who got his nickname Vino from creating these massive bloody messes in the crime scenes he creates. And when he's not being an assassin, he moonlights as a train conductor. Except when things go wrong on the train he conducts, he has the ability to transform into a demonic entity called the Rail Tracer. So he's a bit of a wacky character on his own, and he has an insane philosophy where he essentially believes that he's the center of the universe, and not in like an egotistical way, but in the way that like he observes the universe, and thus the universe exists through his existence, and he can't be killed because if he dies, the universe would simply cease to exist. It's pretty oddball stuff, and even more oddball is his romance subplot in the story that in Bakuno. So Bakuno roughly centers around a gang war that takes place on a train one night in 1929 between these two rival gangs, the Laforets and the Russos, while he's a conductor on the train. And on the Laforets, there's an assassin named Chane Laforet, who's the daughter of the gang's leader. And while this gang war is happening, she's wiping out the Russos. Vino is taking out both the Russos and the Laforets. He comes across Chane, and amidst all the bloodbath, amidst like taking on the big villain of the story arc, he's like immediately transfixed by Chane on the basis that he thinks she's the only person who can kill him. Befitting a batshit insane character, he has a batshit insane romance motivation, and the two of them have like one of the weirdest, most enjoyable, kind of dark, but like funny romance story arcs like I think I've ever seen in an anime, where they're both just these crazy murderers who fall in love on the basis that they both think they're the only ones who can kill the other, and thus they want to just have them in their life as much as possible. It's very weird. It's serious oddball shit. I fucking love it. I fucking love this series so much. There's a lot of romance arcs in this series, and I had to pick one because I didn't want to go through all of them. But a lot of them are really, really good. But this is the one that stands out to me for like my garbage brain senses.
Every time you talk about it, I'm like, I really need to just watch it.
Same.
It's fantastic. It's very it's the most difficult anime to find. It isn't on any streaming services. You basically have to either pirate it or buy it. But it's very, very good. I absolutely love it. And once again, if you didn't watch the episode of my favorite characters where I made this point, this is a point I have to make to everyone who will watch this show. I know that there's some conjecture about subs versus dubs in the anime community. This is a show that I would say you need to watch in dub for those 1920s New York accents. It's like, it just makes it so much more chef's kiss. You know what I mean? What I will say is that like one of the things that sort of like I don't really like about a lot of the sort of like mutual sociopath love stories in a lot of fiction is a lot of the time you get basically a Joker Harley Quinn dynamic, and Joker Harley Quinn is like very famously very problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Where you basically have like one character who's like a sociopathic manipulator, and the other character who has like has basically Stockholm syndrome. And what I like about this arc is that there's sort of like a mutuality to it. They're these two murderers who sort of have like it's more out of like, it's less out of like I want to possess this person, and more out of like a mutual respect for the fact that these two recognize each other as apex predators and just want to be around each other as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I just really enjoy it. It's part of a trope that I'll get into later.
Fair. All right. Maddie, let's hand it off to you then.
Okay, my first romance story is The Sea of Tranquility. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it. It's by, and I don't want to butcher her name, but I can't say it. It's like Katie, but like with a J instead of an I.
Yeah?
Oh, Katya.
Katya.
Yes.
Katya or
yeah.
Katya? I don't know. No, I'm butchering it on purpose.
I'm pretty sure the J in that situation is usually pronounced like a Y.
Okay.
Katya.
Katya.
Katya Milai.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's who it's by. And it is about two young. Well, it follows the main character, a female a female main character. She is kind of broken. She is mute. She's like a gothic Barbie in high school. She's in a new high school too, so she's all the rage. Everyone thinks she's super hot, but she's severely damaged. She won't talk to anyone. And she doesn't want the attention. She makes it very clear that that's not what she wants. Yet she juxtaposes it by the way she dresses and behaves, which makes her very interesting. It's like she really pulled me in when I was first watching it. And then her male love interest is this guy who his name is Josh. And he's also very broken. He hangs out with the popular kid, but that's all. Like that's his only friend. And you can tell that it was more of a childhood friendship, not a I'm friends with him because he's popular friendship. And so basically how it kind of gets started is she runs to kind of cope with her past, and she one day just runs past his garage and sees him doing carpentry or something like that, and she stops, and she just over time has made that her running route, and she just always stops at his house, and they don't speak to each other because she's selectively mute still, so they don't talk. They just have this understanding for one another. And I guess so that's the background. But I guess the reason I like it so much is it's not about like the superhero that comes down and saves the day and fixes the broken woman or the broken man. It's like these two characters who are both very broken that come together and find a way to love regardless of the sharp parts of themselves. And I just like the realism behind it. I like that is true, and that is, to me, what love is in real life. Like, everyone is a little bit broken in their own way, and you have to find a way to overcome those pieces of yourself and also learn to love those pieces in other people. So, and the last sentence, again, I don't know if any of you have read it, but the last sentence, wow, it was such a fulfilling, satisfying ending. I can't even begin to describe it, and I will not ruin it. So if anyone wants to read it, highly recommend.
Cool. That's a good message, I think. Like you were talking about how everyone's a little bit broken. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a nice message to share too. I would imagine, like, is it marketed as a young adult book, or is it
Yeah, it's young adult.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good message to give off, I think. Like, yeah, everyone's a little bit broken, but ultimately, like, you shouldn't rely on some kind of ethereal savior to heal, like, make all of your problems go away, because that's not a good thing.
That's like a really common trope in YA books too.
Yeah, and I'm glad Maddie's first pick is a good breakaway from that. Like, that's certainly a message that I would hope to share with my own works in progress, and I'll get to that later. But like, yeah, what else is there to talk about with this book, Maddie?
There's so much. I guess something I would really like to stress is her selective mutism, because she became selectively mute after being abused by a random man in her younger years, and he stripped her of her future and her dreams. That's why she's mute. And there's something about her silence and her pain in the novel that when she finally finds Josh and they're in silence together, there is something so valuable in that, because sometimes to be heard, you have to have those moments of silence, and you have to really go through the uncomfortableness of not saying anything for long periods of time, and to build a relationship on that. I just think that's such a highlight of this novel that the author did so well. Like you said, it's a great role model novel for young adults in the romance genre because it highlights all the important parts of a relationship that we'd never talk about.
Yeah, definitely. That's like, we should be talking about establishing more healthy relationships. And I think like addressing YA as another completely different, that should be a completely different episode, but like, yeah, that's good. What's the thing, or what's the series called again? Or what's the book called?
The Sea of Tranquility by Katya Millet. I'm going to go with Alex's pronunciation.
Cool. All right. Now we'll move into our second set of picks before we finish off with part 1. And mine, I'll try to keep relatively short because this is an experience, or this is a video game that I really do hope people play for the dynamic, and that is Life is Strange. Specifically the first game, but also including Before the Storm. Episode 1 is free on Steam. Please go check it out. And with Life is Strange, I'm pretty sure a lot of people know it by now, but it is the story of Max Caulfield, who goes back to her hometown, attends a class by Mr. Jefferson, who is a photography teacher, and one day after just heading to the washroom and seeing a blue butterfly, seconds later she sees someone get shot and discovers that she has the ability to time travel. Among other things, Max's story is very heartwarming and it's very sweet, but also there's a lot of emotional weight to it that I think don't nod the developers. I think like they're so good at telling good long form stories over episodic video games like that. Max and Chloe, the current relationship, or the relationship dynamic, I will talk more about that in the ships part, spoilers, but they have such a good fucking dynamic. It's so cute, and there's so much weight behind it. It'll play into two things that I'll also talk about later, but ultimately I think more importantly it's good that we are taking steps towards more stories like this, as to, while not completely open, but as two very accepted queer characters in the video game scene. That's huge. I think like it's important to not just acknowledge queer characters, but queer relationships too. They're not some like weird fetishization by like some straight white guy. It shouldn't be like that. Like, it is complex, it's beautiful, there is highs, lows, good healthy moments too. And I think Life is Strange is certainly, if not like still one of the biggest benchmarks of that, it is certainly a good start towards something. And while I didn't touch too much on Before the Storm is also a very good expansion that goes into the deuteragonist Chloe before Max came back. Her dynamic with Rachel isn't the one I'm going to be talking about later, but yeah, they have a lot more of a complex relationship, Rachel and Chloe, and a lot of people prefer their relationship for that. But again, it follows a lot of beats that I've already said. It's a very it's a very complex, very grounded, very real queer relationship that goes through a lot of good motions. And I think like they're just very well accepted within the community for a reason. Like they're not stereotyped or done dirty, I guess. And that's important. As we were touching on with the Sea of Tranquility, like it's important to have good messages to send. And ultimately Life is Strange, like, hey, queer characters, they're fucking great. So I think especially to queer relationships, also pretty fucking great. But yeah, I'll pass it off to Alex now.
Great. My second pick is also a novel. This in a very different genre from the last one. It's called Red, White, and Royal Blue. It's a rom-com in novel form. And it takes place basically in this is going to get political. Oh, well. It takes place in like an alternate universe where Donald Trump didn't win the 2016 election. And the election was instead won by a woman named Ellen Claremont. And so the novel follows her son, Alex Claremont Diaz. And he has kind of like this weird like rivalry going on with the Prince of England, Henry. And basically Henry's brother, there's like a thing, there's like a royal wedding. There's a cake incident. Then basically their rivalry blows up, and so to save face, they're forced to like start hanging out together. And then they fall in love after that. It's very fun. It's kind of like an enemies to lovers, more rivals to lovers, which is always very fun. There's the main character, Alex, has a really funny, like, not quite like a crisis, but kind of like a realization when he's like, oh wait, I'm not straight. And has like it's a really funny moment. It's a really funny book, but it's also really sweet. And it deals with like long-term or long distance relationships, and like the impact of like a public gay relationship between like two of like the most powerful people in the world, as it were, and the kind of impacts that has on things. Yeah, it's a very fun read. Yeah.
Very cute, very cute. Again, background information. How'd you get your hands on this?
It came out, I think, in 2019, if I remember correctly.
Oh, that's recent.
Yeah, it's like super, super new. Yeah, 2019. It was one of those books that I heard about on Tumblr. I saw someone talking about it, and I was like, oh, that seems interesting. So I looked it up, and I was like, oh, that seems really interesting. So I wrote it down, and then I bought it the next time I went to the bookstore, and I read it in like 2 days.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like I'm not someone who typically goes into like the romance genre, but it was a very fun read.
Cool. All right. Well, assuming there's nothing else to share, then.
Yeah, I think that's it.
All right, Gabe, it's all you.
Okay, so my second pick is not a romance story, but it's a story about marriage, and it's this Swedish movie. I absolutely love it. It's called Force Majeure. It had an American remake recently. If the plot that I'm about to describe sounds anyway familiar to an American movie recently starring Will Ferrell, don't watch the American remake under any fucking circumstances. Essentially, what Force Majeure is it's about a family it's about the Swedish family who goes to a French ski resort over a vacation over holiday, and during one of the days at the ski resort, there's a big avalanche. The family, they're all together at the resort's restaurant, and they're in a balcony overlooking the mountains. And the avalanche is coming, it's coming, and it's barreling towards the restaurant. It doesn't exactly hit the restaurant, but it gets very, very close, and the restaurant is covered in snow. But it happens very quickly. Right as the avalanche is about to hit, the husband grabs his phone and runs away from the table as the wife grabs the kids, and the avalanche hits. And the rest of the movie is sort of a spiraling out from this incident, and I think I absolutely fucking adore this movie. I think the way this movie handles and examines a couple who are examining both their relationship and gender roles. I think the way that this movie handles the subject of discussing gender roles and relationships and stuff like that, it's very mature. I think it handles it very seriously, and I don't know. I think there isn't really a lot I can get into that won't like spoil a lot of the movie, and but basically it's sort of an examination of like relationships from that perspective with this couple like having a falling out over this incident, and I fucking love it.
Nice. What does I was thinking about it as you were describing it. What is the American one? Just so we can all explicitly avoid it.
It's called Downhill. It stars Will Ferrell and
all right.
I can't remember the actress's name. She's from Seinfeld.
Okay,
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
All right. Well,
don't watch it.
Yeah,
it's very bad. It kind of bastardizes the entire point of the movie, and like makes it a much more like opaque that like he was like a bad guy. It makes it a lot more blatant. It reframes a lot of the stuff that happens in the scene to like make it more blatantly that he was like a selfish dickhead and not like a moment of panic that has like caused an alert in their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the ending is almost completely different. Don't watch the American version.
Gotcha.
I hate when they do that with the endings. Like they change them completely.
Yeah, it's a way more, I won't spoil it, but it's a way more like Hollywood ending.
Sounds about right.
Fucking Hollywood endings. God.
Yeah.
Always gotta go
for Force Majeure's amazing though. I highly recommend it. It's like top 3 all-time movies for me.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
I think like just on a slight off thing, whenever Gabe like lists something, like if it's in like top 5 or top 3, then I have to get my hands on it.
It's like that's a high compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of movies. I think I've seen like 200 movies in my life, and like I don't know what my top 3 are offhand, but I know Force Majeure is probably up there.
Mm-hmm. All right, well,
put it in the chat so I know how to spell it.
Okay.
I hope that's a good recommendation, because this episode is coming out a few days away from Valentine's Day and also my birthday. Just thought I'd mention that. Because
your birthday is on Valentine's Day?
Yes.
You're a little love baby, Dean.
Yeah. I always say like, oh hey, it's Valentine's Day on the 14th, and then like and then quietly, it's also my birthday for reasons.
Oh my God.
But yeah, anyway, I hope these are all good recommendations for everybody come that weekend in quarantine when you might be away from. I'm going down a weird tangent. I'm sorry, Maddie.
Hi. My next love story it's actually, well, I was gonna go for the classic Great Gatsby, but it's so overdone, so I decided to change it up, and I want to talk about the show Atypical. It follows a young man named Sam. He's on the spectrum and he goes to public school. It's just as a show about awareness, really, really well done. And I used to work with kids on the spectrum, and I just found this show was such a great example for them when they were old enough to watch it, because they were quite young. Because the main character, Sam, ends up having a romantic relationship with kind of a loudmouth, obnoxious, nerdy girl. And there needs to be representation for kids on the spectrum that they can find love too.
Absolutely.
And this show does just that. It makes my heart so happy. Sam works through his love for Paige in such a cute and wholesome way that makes you feel good. And then their relationship turns a little bit more PG-14, or 13. It's 13, isn't it?
I don't know.
I think both exist.
There's such a leap between 13 and 14-year-olds and what shit they kind of do.
Right? And so then they start exploring like a sexual relationship, and I find that to be it's so significant to have an example out there for young kids on the spectrum and know that they can have love, they can find love, they can be sexual with their partner, and it's okay and it's normal, and it can be something special for them too. I just love it. I highly recommend it. It's a great show just as is. Like, it's not necessarily a love-based show. It's just kind of like a life show. It has 3 seasons. I've binged it like 3 times now. It's so good. It's so funny. Sam is so lovable. Paige becomes lovable. At first, I hated her, but now I just kind of like her because she's grown on me a bit. She's not as obnoxious anymore.
Nice. It's good to know. I applaud you, Maddie, for choosing like very, I guess like very important stories, like very good, like very important, while not holistically romance story or like romantic stories, like they do have very important messages to them.
Thank you. And I mean, this is maybe a whole tangent we shouldn't get into, but I feel as I get older and now that I'm out of high school, further in my life, I've experienced romantic relationships. I wish that there would have been more healthy role models for me to look up to in social media. I mean, I had a great role model relationship in my life with my parents, but media didn't have one. And now when I recommend romance, anything, I try to make it healthy because I just see how much it affected me as a young girl. And I just wish that it would have been different now that I'm older.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, be the change that you want, right? But okay, I guess with all of our recommendations out of the way, to touch on what Maddie briefly said, I won't try to take everything that she said because I'm going to try to pull off an amazing transition here. But she had mentioned that like there were a lot of things associated with romance stories that, you know, can sometimes seep into real life. And through that, we have tropes. And I didn't do a good transition, but we're going to go with it anyway. So there are a lot of common tropes when it comes to, I guess, romantic relationship stories or, you know, romantic relationship dynamics. And originally I did state that we were going to try to cover 2 of them, but because we're closing in on our first hour here, let's try to keep it maybe just to 1, because I know that with our ship discussion, that'll take a lot more time. So I'll try to keep mine relatively short. One of my favorite tropes now that I think I said in a previous episode of the podcast was a guilty pleasure is enemies to lovers. I fucking love that shit now. It is so thing. It's like it's still like everything that I said in that episode, I still kind of echo now. So like the whole notion of like they want to kill each other at first, but then they're now fucking each other. That's great. It's fun. It's thing. Like it's a fun dynamic that I think, while it is obviously being played up a lot right now in a lot of YA books especially, I think it still has its place, and if done well, it can still be something that carries forward into other stories. And yeah, I don't really have much else to expand on enemies to lovers. Probably someone else can, but I think briefly actually on the opposite end there is friends to lovers. And friends to lovers is, I think, the love story that I still want to go for. Like personally, I'm very much a person that would love to have a friend first and then date them if the relationship and the consent is there. I don't know, it just seems like a very it always results in the perfect romantic ending that a lot of Hollywood loves to portray it as. You know, like they go through their issues and they have their ups and downs, but ultimately it's not like extremely toxic ups and extremely toxic downs. It's like healthy. Friends to lovers always is like a very healthy thing, and I like that shit.
Yeah, funny you should say that, because that's also the first one I wrote down. Specifically, I did childhood friends to lovers. But like for me, it's the same thing. It's like the idea of like, you know, someone who knows you so well and then you start dating. It's just always like a top tier content right there.
Yeah.
Love it. Because you already talked about it, though, that's all I'll say about it. The other one that I wrote down is the power couple dynamic, which is like, you know, you have the people in the couple are both like super powerful, strong. They're each other's equals in every way. They like walk into a room together and everyone turns to stare. That's also a favorite dynamic of mine. Just like two people that are the top of their game and respect each other for it, and everyone is like jealous of them and in awe of them because they're like how no one is ever gonna be that cool.
Facts. I was thinking for some reason when you said that the power couple, I was thinking like The Incredibles popped into my head.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good example of it.
Yeah, it's still my favorite. I think I couldn't really think of any other ones. It was always like, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Incredible. I remember like their wedding scene. That was very cute.
Yeah, it's so fun. And when you have like two like really powerful characters, especially if you're going into like superheroes or like magic or like, you know, sword fighting, that kind of stuff, and they're like equally matched, and like can take out big groups of enemies together. That's just it's top tier content.
Hard agree. All right. Gabe, how about you? Let's breeze through your tropes real quick.
Yeah, I only have one, it's
right.
going to be super quick because it's very simple. It's very basic. I just fucking love it. It's the outlaw couple trope. It's sort of a subgroup of the power couple trope, but it's specifically with crimes. I love criminal couples. I love them so much. I love just having two characters who are just chaotic, criminal demons just want to just fuck shit up, and they want to fuck shit up together. Like if you give me like an Anne Bonny and Mary Read or like a Bonnie and Clyde, this is right here is my favorite thing ever. I think about this every day. I think about this all night long. I stay awake at night not sleeping because I'm thinking of this.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
Now
Is there
you will never
can't sleep.
Yeah.
You will never show me an example of like an outlaw couple where I'll be like, oh, I don't really like that. I didn't really like that at all. And that's also why Bakuno is like one of my favorite animes, because that show has a lot of relationships in it. And usually I'm not a fan of a series where a lot of the characters get paired up by the end of it. But all of the characters in Bakuno are criminals. So I make a fucking exception for it because I like seeing criminals getting paired up.
Nice.
Amen.
All right, Maddie.
Amen to crime.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a thing. We were talking about good messages. That's a fucking good one, isn't it?
Insider Revolution.
Thanks, guys. We can recommend role models, just we can't be.
Dance, dance, you, me, dance, dance, revolution. Revolution, overthrow the government? Yeah, I sure hope it does.
Oh my fucking god, what happened? We were so in focus, guys. All right, sorry. Maddie, go ahead.
yeah, I'm going to turn it around on the healthy because I've talked about this in my guilty pleasures with you guys, but the good girl, bad boy, I love it. I live for it. I always think of Grease when this happens too, like when I think about this, because it's just the classic bad guy in a leather jacket, slicked back hair, and he's like all tall, dark, and broody and handsome, and she's always cute and like super blonde and usually always white, but I don't know. I just fall for it. As crappy of a trope it is, I like it. And I can't get enough of it. I'm like Gabe with the crime. I just like lay in bed and think about it all the time. I just love. And you know what? I'm going to say it. I think about this with Jughead Jones and Betty Cooper on Riverdale all the time.
Oh,
and I
no.
hate Riverdale, but it's so good. I can't get enough. Alex, I know you said you didn't like Riverdale at one point, I think, but
Oh, that's
Listen.
very polite of you, Maddie.
At only one point? That's
At only one point. What the? Did you just meet Alex yesterday?
Can't wait for my weekly Riverdale watch tomorrow where I rant about all the nonsensical plot points to my friends. I do hear you though.
I can't blame you.
If this
I do
channel
hear
ever
you,
gets
though.
fucking merchandise, there's gonna be like Alex soundbite buttons where it's like fuck Riverdale or fuck Sarah J. Maas or fuck this.
I can't blame her though. Like in the first season when Jughead is like, I'm different, Betty. I don't fit in. I was like,
I'm weird.
someone turn it off.
I'm
Like,
a
turn it
weirdo.
off.
I don't fit in and I don't want to fit in.
Do you see my
I
hat?
want it.
Who does that?
Have you ever seen me without this stupid hat on? That's weird.
Alex knowing it word for word, that is hilarious.
I skipped a part in the middle, but that's fine.
It's,
Jesus
yeah, I
fucking
don't know
Christ,
what it
I
is
lost
about
control already.
Sorry.
Oh
Sorry.
my
But like,
Never
but like,
had it.
but like, Maddie. Sorry, to get somewhat back on track. You were talking about Grease. Grease is like one of my all-time favorite movies. Like I love that movie. Like I like look at their relationships and I'm like, this is so unhealthy, but it's so fun.
It is, and there's so much singing and dancing and cuteness happening.
Yeah. All right.
It's
To any
yeah.
kids listening to this, first of all, please go to bed. It's very late. We're a bunch of swearing adults. But secondly, it's okay to ingest a little bit of poison just as long as it doesn't kill you.
You can
Also,
have a
the fact
tiny
that you
little
just
bit of
call us
poison.
adults.
Just a little bit. Just like enough to
Self-care.
cause what butterflies think or what do you think butterflies feel like? Just a little bit.
It's like no, but like this is actually a good thing to say. You're allowed to enjoy things even if you don't think they work in real life. You're allowed to enjoy things and also be critical of them at the same time.
Yeah, it's called
True.
balance. We have
Yeah.
to have it.
Yeah. All right. I guess then, speaking on balance, and I'm going to try and attempt another very smooth transition here, but I think with any good dynamic or with any good relationship, you're always going to need a good balance between, you know, chaos and peace and all this and all that. So now we'll be talking about our favorite ships that, while, you know, maybe they might not always be completely balanced, they certainly do have a good, you know, they've certainly made a good impression with us. And this one, I think we'll have plenty of time to go over individually. So we'll go back to how we did it with the romance stories one by one. How did I do with that transition, guys?
I'm
need
gonna
validation.
I'm gonna give that one like a 3 out of 5.
Oh, I
I'm
thought
gonna
you were
give
about
that
to...
one a 10. I'm gonna give that one a segue out of 10.
A penguin out of 10. Really good job, Dean.
All right, I got a 3 out of 5, a segue out of 10, and a penguin out of 10. Thanks, guys. I need the validation. All right.
As far as segues go, pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So for my first one, there were a lot of ships that I could have chosen from actually, but I think it's only obvious that I had mentioned it before, and I'll be talking first about Max and Chloe from Life is Strange. What I guess I haven't already mentioned in when I talked about Life is Strange, I think like overall, like I said, that they're very good. You know, it's a very good representation, or it's very good for the LGBTQIA plus community to have those characters for them. I think while there are points where it certainly does get very high and very low between the two of them, I don't think it's ever to the degree where it's like very toxic. I think they really do stick by each other a lot, and shows that kind of like adolescent romance in a very much needed perspective. Like you can't always just have straight teenagers doing that. There are obviously queer teenagers. None of them have time traveling powers, but I digress. As well, they're both not completely polar opposites, but like obviously Max is a lot more reserved, starts off pretty introverted, keeps to herself a lot. And then Chloe, I think, is very abrasive. She gets in people's faces. She isn't afraid. And she just doesn't give a fuck sometimes. And how they play off of each other on that, like it's a very good yin and yang I guess. Like, it's two different sides eventually blending really well into each other. And I think as the series continues, they just bring out like a lot in each other. Like, through Max, Chloe becomes a lot more vulnerable. She's not just learning to be the tough girl anymore. Like, she has people to rely on at that point, because one of her big things is like she's always had to fend for herself, and she always thought that she was alone. And with Chloe, Max has become she's come out of her shell a lot more. She's been a lot more adventurous. She's more brave. So like I said, like, they really do bring out the best in each other. To this day, one of the few scenes that there are two scenes within Life is Strange that really get me emotional every time. And I know Alex has the game, so I'll try not to spoil it, but the first few minutes of episode 4 fucking kill me so much. And I think even later on in either episode 4 or episode 5, when there's supposed to be like the final confrontation and shit, if you pick the correct options, it really shows a lot of Chloe's vulnerability that she has evolved with through Max. Like, she is no longer like she is. I think at that point, or in that moment, it's hard to describe, and I can't show any footage because of copyright. But in that moment, you get exactly what those two characters have brought to each other. You get Max, who is really standing up for herself and, you know, being brave, and you get Chloe, who is showing a lot more vulnerability and willing to acknowledge her emotions again, which is huge character development. That's why I love that. Like, I love it when relationships bring out the best in each other, and as it should, right? Like, for a queer relationship too, that's like, they did a really good job. Don't nod. And before I ultimately bastardize my point with more nonsense, let's have a quick discussion on it. So Gabe, I know you're familiar with Life is Strange. What do you think on Max and Chloe's relationship?
I'm very familiar with Life is Strange. I really like Max and Chloe, honestly. One of the things that I've encountered with a lot of people on the internet is like the discussions of specifically Chloe. Not really as like a love interest, but as a person. Chloe's got issues, and I think how the story handles being in a relationship with someone who like has baggage like that, I thought that was like, I thought that they did a really good job of handling that, because like, they never made it like a big drama over like if Chloe had like an outburst or something, because like it's just part of the relationship, you know. Like, there's never like a moment where Max is like weirdly angry at Chloe for like an episode, or there's never a moment where it's like it's made it to be like a more serious drama than it is. It's a part of their dynamic that Chloe has issues, and I think like, yeah, I think they handled that like really well, because like, you're never gonna get a relationship that doesn't have like some form of baggage in it, and like, it's not really about like avoiding the baggage. It's about like how you and your partner like deal with that baggage. I think that game did a really good job of that.
Yeah. So to build off of that really quickly, actually, as I've been like doing better to educate myself on, you know, relationship health and all that, I think what Max and Chloe do really well, or how their relationship is portrayed really well, is that they have, you know, they go through ups and downs, but it's never super toxic, and it's never super toxic, I guess. Like, there's not extreme ups and extreme lows. A lot of their relationship at the time, or a lot of their relationship during, or like on screen, basically, is like, most of the time they're just there communicating. It's a very healthy dynamic, and that is important. That's something that I think really has to be emphasized a lot more and discussed, because having toxic ups and toxic downs is not good. Like, it really does the thing. It like, you know, there's a lot of I guess manipulation that goes into that, especially from perpetrators with a lot of baggage. There's a lot of damage that goes into it, and I think the more like, I think when we take that into context, especially for the audience that Life is Strange is meant for, and that is you know, for, I don't think it's specifically for queer teenagers, but it definitely appeals to them a lot. It's good to show what healthy relationships go through and not just fluctuate, right? They shouldn't always be fluctuating between really, really good moments and really, really bad moments, because that's just not going to leave a good impression. It's not always going to be like every single week they're going to be going on dates, and then suddenly when there's no text, then they're just going to be on the edge of a breakup. I don't think that we should be doing that anymore. But yeah, that was Max and Chloe. Alex, I'll hand it over to you for your first ship.
Yes. For the first ship I chose, I had a very difficult time figuring out who I wanted to talk about. But I eventually decided that the first ship I want to talk about is Percy and Annabeth from the Percy Jackson universe. Which is, yeah, it's, I started reading Percy Jackson when I was like in elementary school. And it's just, I found that, like, looking back on it, Percy and Annabeth were one of the first like couples in a media that I was really rooting for, like, to get together. So it's definitely a very nostalgic ship for me. But I loved the way that the relationship built up over the books. And they were like, there was like a bit of misunderstanding at first, and then they both had like awkward crushes on each other, and then they realized it was mutual and got together, and both of them were like willing to like sacrifice things to help each other. Which, like, yeah, and then after they were together, because, you know, Rick Riordan kept writing books and they kept coming back even if they weren't always the main characters, but their relationship felt very steady throughout it. Like, they always felt like they could depend on each other, which I always really appreciated. Like, I do think it's at a point kind of like hard to romanticize being in a relationship from like the time you're 16 all the way till you're an adult, because I feel like a lot of times those relationships don't really work out really well, and that's something that's definitely romanticized too much, or like is used too much in media, I guess. But with these characters, because it's so nostalgic for me, it's just like I wouldn't want it any other way for them.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've like familiarized myself with the Percy Jackson books, but oh man, did they have a good relationship. That's what I remember. Like, they really bounce off each other really well, I think.
Yeah, they have good communication, and I agree, they balance each other really well. And there's also like, this is again like friends to lovers coming into this, but like they really had a good foundation of trust with each other before they got into a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that like, I remember, spoilers for the book series, and I'll actually say that because I actually think people should read these books. Unlike other books I've talked about before. But like, spoilers, like there's a scene I remember in the 5th book where like Percy shares like a secret with Annabeth that if he told it to the wrong person could literally end his life. But he trusts her with it, and it ends up saving his life. And I think like that trust between them is really important, and yeah, I like them a lot.
Nice. All right. Gabe, let's move on to you then.
Okay. So I mentioned this one a little bit before the podcast got started. Whether or not these two characters are actually canonically in a relationship is heavily up to interpretation.
I'm excited.
But it it's Jesse and James from Pokemon. That's what I was referring to.
That's not what I was expecting.
That's not. Holy shit!
I said I loved Outlaw couples, and I specifically refused to name these as an example because I knew I was going to talk about these two later. I love these two so much. When these two make Pokemon, okay? You can't. These two are like the golden star of that whole series. If there's no Pokemon without these two. They are wonderful. I love them. I don't have a very in-depth discussion to make about them because, like I said when I was talking about outlaw couples aren't really an opportunity for like very in-depth relationships because they're both just mutually bastards. And in this case, that's basically their whole role. They're just very mutual bastards who just want to cause shit and stir up. They want to stir shit up.
Yeah.
And make it fucking trouble for everyone around them. And they do it. They have fun doing it. They have an amazing camaraderie. Like, I fucking adore these two. To this day, I still fucking adore Jesse and James from Pokemon. They're like, if you ask me like what my main go is in terms of like a relationship, I 100% Jesse and James from Pokemon. Nothing else.
Mm.
I mean, they are pretty iconic. I'll give you that.
They are
absolute chaos
icons.
Yeah. I was thinking, I as a kid, I remember always like, oh, it's Jesse and James. They're here to cause danger. And then I started growing up. I'm like, God damn, what the fuck is wrong with you two? And then now I'm at a place, Gabe, I think with you, where they're so chaotic, it's almost wholesome.
Anytime where I'm like having a stony Pokemon night, I will watch any episode and I'll just be like, okay, when are we get into the Jesse and James scene? When are they gonna show up? When are they gonna come on, let's get to it. I don't care about Ash, I don't care about Brock, I don't care about Missy, I don't care about any of that shit. Where the fuck are Jesse and James? I want to see them. I want to see them in their dumbass cat. They have a cat, you guys. Come on.
Yeah, they have a talking Meowth. They have very flamboyant hair.
Listen, they
get into costumes a lot.
Chaotic bisexual icons, and I stand by it.
The absolute Guinness world-breaking amount of cross-dressing that these two do.
And we stand them for it.
Absolutely.
Like I said, chaotic bisexual icons.
Chef's kiss.
Just.
Right. I remember one of my favorite things about the rocket ship community, which is what it's called.
Is that actually what that's so cute? That's so
cute. Good ship name.
There was a piece of fan art that was like Jesse and it's like a very realistically drawn Jesse and James like getting married thing. And literally every single fucking comment in the thing is, why isn't James wearing the dress?
I mean, why isn't he though?
He was wearing the tux. He was wearing the dress, and everyone in the comments was like, "Why isn't she wearing the suit and he's wearing the dress? What the fuck?"
You could only imagine that like thing. You could only imagine that they had a frivolous debate about that. Like it wasn't one trying to stop the other. It was literally like James wanted to wear the dress, Jesse wanted to wear the suit, and eventually they just had to settle. It was starting to piss off everybody.
I just love them. They fuck up consistently for 20 years, but Giovanni has never fired them because, like me, just loves their presence. They bring so much energy.
Can you imagine, like... Okay, I promise we'll get to Maddie's in a second, because, oh god. But can you imagine, like, everyone at Team Rocket, like, tuning into their fucking shenanigans like it's a reality show?
Oh, fucking hands down, Giovanni has like a fucking live stream to that shit all day. That's the whole reason he has them. I would fucking bet money on that being canon. He definitely doesn't have them for their use of Pokemon capturing.
Yeah, he knows he knows who to rely on if he actually wants to deal some damage. But Jesse and James, it's just entertainment.
Also, side note, I'm not going to take constructive criticism on this. Giovanni is a DILF. Moving on.
Okay, Maddie.
Yeah, I can pick up after that. Hard to follow though, Gabe.
You bastard! Why would you set Maddie up like that? Come on. You've set her up for like timing failure. She can't top that. All right. Anyway,
Damn, maybe I should have gone first.
We should know better by now. Always put Gabe at the end.
Yeah, true. We really should.
all right. Anyway, Maddie.
Okay, so I am going to do a relationship, but it's not necessarily romance, but it is love. And it's Harry Potter and Hermione Granger. I think they encompass what love is outside of sexualization in their friendship. A moment that I think about specifically, and maybe this is against the rules, Dean, for bringing this up, so I'm sorry, but
I've lost control twice tonight, Maddie. I think rules are out the window.
It's okay. Deathly Hallows, I don't know if it's part 1 or part 2, but there's a scene where they're dancing in the tent. It's after Ron has left the threesome they had going on there, their little threesome adventure party, and he left it. And Hermione's heartbroken because that's her love. She wants him there, obviously. But Harry's there to pick up the pieces and to show her this unconditional, from the heart, from his soul love that is so pure. And I wish it was maybe talked about a little bit more, because I see a lot of ships for Hermione and Harry in like a sexual relationship. And I just think they encompass love so well in this friendship that they have. And I also think it's very important that there is representation for healthy relationships between men and women that aren't sexual, because it shows that they are equals and they do value each other's company, and that it doesn't always have to be sexualized. So it's not necessarily romance, but it is love. And I think it is so important. And it just makes my heart giggle, basically, when I watch it and read it. But the scene in the movie, like, it hit home because they had the song. It's by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And I don't know, it just had this ambiance around it that it made you feel good.
Yeah, I'm with you on the thing. I'm with you on I guess normalizing men and women relationships, because that's been like a serious thing for so long. It's like, oh, you can't be friends with a girl unless you want to like date her or something, and like, get rid of that.
Yeah.
I think like we can have a whole other discussion on that later, but ultimately, yeah, I agree. Like, Harry and Hermione, from what I remember of the books, I really like their friendship in the books, and in the movies too. Like, despite not ending up together, I think that was probably for the best anyway, because I do like Ron and Hermione, but I like Ron and Hermione romantically, but I think friendship wise, like, it's two friends supporting each other. It's not I don't think it really should be anything more than that.
Yeah, and it's like, it's an unconditional love that's so rare to find, romance or not. And so I really did want to touch on it in this episode, because it was such a pure form of love, in my opinion. Very like special and charming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an easy title change. I'll just be like, love and romance stories. Perfect.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I really said F you to the system.
Like I said, I lost control twice tonight. There's no system anymore.
Yeah, probably good thing that Gabe did go before me, because he broke the system.
Was this your guys' fucking plan this whole time while I was gone? You wanted to cause chaos?
System error.
Oh my god. Okay, so moving into our second set of ships. I do want to give a very quick honorable mention that I am very much guilty for, and that is every Overwatch ship. It's not like I'm not gonna elaborate on it any further, but like the queer ships, the straight ships, all of it. I'm trash for all of it. When it gets sexual, maybe not that, but like, oh fuck, it's good shit. And I'll expand on that, I think, more when Gabe and I get to our non-linear video game stories episode. But my second pick is also a video game relationship. Nathan and Elena from Uncharted. Between 4 games, their relationship develops so fucking perfectly. There's witty sarcasm, there's genuine honesty, there's really good communication, and there's chaotic hijinks. Fucking perfect. I think more so they like it felt like Elena had been the one this whole time. Like she had been the best friend or enemy to eventual lover that Nathan Drake was going to have anyway. And I'm glad that I'm glad that Naughty Dog decided to give us Nathan and Elena for life, basically, because they just have such good fucking chemistry that I think should be a staple in a lot of video game relationships, especially like given the tone of the Uncharted games. Like obviously they're they were first teen games, and then now they're branching out into more mature storytelling. That still, I think, should be the standard, because everything that I had said before, like, that's just signs of a thing. That's just signs of like two people who love each other willing to go through pretty much anything, right? Like whether or not they're, whether or not they're uncovering secrets together, or trying to like deal with kids, or even just trying to play Crash Bandicoot together. That shit's cute, and they are the perfect cute couple to do that. They are so well represented through their voice actors, through their motion captures, through their lines, through their performances. Like, I think there is no better video game relationship than Nathan and Elena. I think I think more so in like modern games, because I don't know. I think they're just perfect. They really are like a good standard, and I think like to this day, whether or not like you're coming in as like a hardcore Uncharted fan, or like you're getting into the Uncharted games for the first time, of like even if you're just watching the videos on YouTube, like their interactions together are so freaking cute, and they're so funny, and like you can tell a lot of the banter. Like they bring out the best in each other. They sometimes bring out the worst in each other. They bring each other up a lot, but they're not afraid to like take some pot shots. Not ill-intentionally, they joke around obviously, but I think Nathan and Elena are just perfect.
That one scene at the beginning of Uncharted 4 when they're just like they're not doing Indiana Jones shit, and they're just like at their fucking condo, like talking about stuff. That's such a fucking cute scene. I fucking dig that shit so hard. That scene's so good.
Yeah.
Like I do enjoy their relationship as like adventurers, but that one scene was like I was watching it when I was playing Uncharted 4 for the first time, and I was like, oh man, this is a fucking good video game right here.
It's like it's that perfect settling down that all of us have kind of thought about at one point, and at one point, right? Like we've all thought about like life is getting a little bit too crazy, and eventually we'll find that one perfect or like that one person that like rounds us out and makes us not as chaotic, or like someone who shares the chaos and shit. Like you're just chilling in an apartment or something like that. That I think is my ideal future still, and to have it happen in the video game with my two favorite characters, it's like, oh, I love this. But anyway, Alex, let's move on to you.
Yes. Okay, it's my turn. My turn to bend the rules slightly.
Great.
No, I'm talking about Critical Role. I've talked about Critical Role before in the favorite characters episode when I talked about Jester, who owns my whole heart. And so basically, the second campaign of Critical Role, which if for those of you who don't know, it's like basically a web series where they play Dungeons and Dragons. But the second campaign is basically a multi-shipper's dream. Like all of the characters have like really good dynamics with each other. So the ship in particular I want to talk about is Beau and Yasha. They're very different characters. At this point, the second campaign, I'm going to call it season 2, even though it's not really, has been going on for like nearly 3 years now. And from the beginning, they were both kind of drawn to each other. And then, like, plot happens. And so nothing really has an opportunity. But then in the last few months, I think they've started really like considering being in a relationship and getting together, and it's really cute to see them the way that they've like built their relationship, where both of them, like Beau at the beginning was very hard to get close to. She pushed away a lot. Yasha was very secretive. She was always leaving and coming back, and find out about like her backstory and kind of understand that like both of them have been through some really hard stuff. And then throughout the show, they start going through also different hard stuff together. And again, it's that building of trust, this foundation of trust that they build with like not just each other, but with like the whole group. And then now we get to see them like flirting with each other, writing each other poems and letters and stuff, and trying to go on dates while also trying to like, deal with world-ending shit, because that's what happens in D&D. But it's just it's really fun to watch them go through that.
Oh, that's so cute. I ship.
And like nothing about these characters, but you're down.
No, absolutely not. I mean, like from the sounds of it, it's kind of like the basis for a good ship anyway. It's just you don't have to necessarily have the most insight into a relationship to know that the chemistry is there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like two people who just vibe really well. Like, you know that feeling when you see it.
They're so cute. There's so much good fan art of them.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's my second ship.
All right, Gabe. Unless yours is completely batshit too.
No. No. My next one's like pretty normal. It's so I've been replaying the fuck out of the Mass Effect games recently, and those games are like they have a reputation for the large amount of potential romance options in those games. So I knew I wanted to talk about Mass Effect at some point in this episode, and I was like, there were two that I was debating between, but the one I landed on was Garrus and Shepard from Mass Effect. To me, that's the absolute peak. So how a lot of the relationships in Mass Effect work is like it's pretty standard RPG stuff. You'll pretty much like follow like a sort of romance through line throughout the game, and like you'll just pick dialogue options with like a certain character. But what I love particularly about Garrus and Shepard is that it never does the thing that I kind of hate with a lot of romance subplots in fiction, where like characters suddenly have like a massive personality change as a result of their romance, and it feels like they're like completely different people when they're around their partner. That shit doesn't happen here. Garrus's whole thing throughout Mass Effect is that he's basically like Shepard's second in command. He has huge amounts of like admiration and respect for Shepard as like a commander, and like he has this very militaristic like camaraderie with Shepard. Like if you play through the game without romancing him once, he's basically like a bro. He's like constantly by your side. He's the best character to have equipped on your party, like in terms of just stats. So he's basically always around you, and you get very used to having Garrus around you as like a bro. What I love about that is that like sort of militaristic respect it's not changed like even a little bit when if you're like in a relationship, if you choose to have a relationship with him or not. It's very like I don't know what it is. There's something that's very earnest about his romance arc. There's like where it just feels like a natural trajectory of like between those two characters, but it doesn't feel like he has to become a completely different person. And like it ends up with a lot of like very cute romance moments where you have this stone cold military badass trying desperately to flirt, and it's fucking hilarious. Like some of the shit that comes out of this dude's mouth when he suddenly has to turn on the charm and not be like Mr. Elite Sniper guy. It's fucking great. I fucking love this guy. It also helps that like out of all the aliens in Mass Effect, he's like a part of the species that's my number one favorite. They're dope. The Turians are fucking dope as hell. They're like Velociraptor dudes, kind of, which might sound a little weird from a romance angle, but like, trust me, if you play the game, he has a very suave voice. It's like one of those sort of raspy voices that's like kind of it's like pretty. It's I don't know. It's hard to describe. I fucking dig that shit. I dig that whole relationship in that game a lot.
I don't think you would be the first one to advocate for Garrus Shepard.
Garrus and Shepard. Yeah, Garrus and Shepard are. I was debating between Tali and Shepard or Garrus and Shepard.
Oh, Tally's a good one too. Yeah.
Tally's my girl. Every time I play through the game as Guy Shep, I go with Tali. Every time I play through the game as Femme Shep, I go Garrus. Unfortunately, you can't. There's no other options there. It's a mid 2000s video game. It's unfortunate. But yeah, I think those two are like the ones that are done really well from like a writing standpoint and like how the actual romance is. I feel like a lot of the romances in those games kind of fuck up in a lot of ways. I have some grief with some of the other characters, but I think Tali and Garrus, those are the ones that I think they got them really, really right. I think they got like a lot of the writing really right. There's a lot of really solid lines in there that are just absolute winners, I think.
Nice. Well, I mean, I don't have much else to comment on that, so I think like it's thing. Like all I know from what I remember is like, yeah, everyone really liked Garrus. So
yeah,
nice. I think more so than any of the other male love interests, really. Like whenever they had the option, they would almost always go with Garrus.
Yeah, and it's sort of a weird thing. Like, Garrus is like one of the few guy characters in a video game where I was like, okay, now hang on a second, I might be just a teensy bit gay.
You'd be open to the you'd probably kiss him, but
it's not even looks wise, just like the way, just like his voice. It's mostly his voice. If you've heard Garrus's voice, you'd understand. Garrus's voice is fucking top tier.
Nice. Good voices are always a really nice turn on, I think.
I'll send a clip of him to the group chat so y'all can know what I'm talking about. His voice acting is like supreme.
Nice. All right. While you do that, let's move on to Maddie to close off this section.
Yeah, my last ship would be Jaime and Claire from the first season of Outlander. I love Outlander, period, just like a bit of a history buff. But Jaime and Claire hit different. They're awesome. I love that she has I have a husband back at home, but like I have this fiery romantic passion here in the 1700s that I'm gonna choose over my husband in the 1900s. 1700s, you know, like, I don't know, there's something about it I really like. Also, to make this maybe a little bit more like R-rated, hopefully the kids really are not listening right now, but the sex scenes in that show are elite. They're so good.
Don't hear that
they're-
often.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like actually good because they don't, I don't know, they don't sugarcoat it. Like the first scene, he's like bad in bed and she tells him that. Like she's like, yeah, you kind of were. And then they work through it together throughout their relationship. And I just like it. And I think he's so hot. Like Jaime is dreamy to me. I'm just like, wow, he's the perfect specimen ever, period. That's all. So, I mean, maybe that has a lot to do with why I ship them, but
That's fair.
it's really good. I don't know if any of you have seen Outlander, but
I have not.
super
No.
cool. She like,
I-
travels back in time.
Yeah.
Really good.
It's on my list.
What isn't on your list though?
Excuse you.
You have so much
I
on
feel
one
you,
list, Alex.
Alex.
It might as be a fucking commandment tablet.
That's
Dean,
two different lists.
You can't call out the list length of TV shows to watch. Unspoken rule.
Okay, yeah, fine. All right. Sorry.
We all have
Yeah,
the
no,
list.
it's really good.
Yeah.
It kind of goes downhill a bit, though. I will be honest.
Like the
at end
relationship
of
or the show?
season- The show. There's like 4 or 5 seasons, and I found it went down after season 2. I think that it's worth just watching season 1, like as its own thing. It's really well done. It's super interesting too, and there is a parallel between Claire's husband back in the 1900s and his relative in the 1700s. It's truly like, I don't like, it was very disturbing in some scenes too, like to the point that I was genuinely shocked that it was allowed to air on TV. So
I
So,
guess
yeah,
that could be a
I would
whole
check
other
it out.
discussion then on
mhm.
controversial scenes. That'd be a good
Yeah.
one, actually.
But the
Sure,
sex
I
scenes in
know
this one are
some
not
of them.
controversial. They're good. Ship
Yeah.
them.
All right. You heard it here first. There's actually a purpose for a sex scene. That's an
Yes.
advocate. Just
For once.
yeah. I think just like, you know, probably just between Alex and I in this series that we love to shit on. Yeah, we don't know what a good sex scene is.
Sex scenes are so poorly done. Like, I can't, yeah, I don't know. I don't even have words.
Yeah, there's very few things that I've seen or read where I've been like, that sex scene was definitely necessary and also like enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now I know a thing. Like I'd be the kind of parent that would turn my kids away from sex scenes, but not because it's two people having sex. It's like, dude, this is fucking disgusting. They're not doing anything properly.
And it's not real. Like, I'm like, ugh, I hate how not realistic it is.
Yeah.
And also, like, why the lighting is always good. I'm like, that's not real. Okay, the lighting is not always going to be that great.
All right, side tangent on sex scenes. Let's go.
I don't know.
They're fucking garbage. A lot of them, like a lot of like movie sex scenes fucking suck.
And in TV shows, I remember, I don't know why, but I have this really distinct memory of watching one episode of Supernatural, and like Dean is having sex with some lady, and they're like hanging out on the bed. She's got like the sheets wrapped completely around her. It looks so uncomfortable, and I'm just sitting there like, this can't be how it works. Come on.
That's literally it, though. It's like so unrealistic.
It's even worse for TV, I think, because obviously you have a younger demographic by nature with easier access to it. Like with movies, you have to buy the fucking ticket, but with TV, it's easy for them to like click on a show and then it's like, oh, air quotes, sex.
There's a scene in the Netflix Daredevil series that makes me lose my fucking mind. I love this series to death, so I kind of hate to talk shit about it. But this is from season 2, so it's okay to talk shit about it because season 2 sucks. there's this fucking scene where it's these two characters and they're like about to have sex, and then like it cuts away, and then a few scenes later it cuts back, and they're like it's like sort of zooming out from the couch, and it pans over to them, and they're like panting, and their faces are all red like they've had sex, but they're like completely clothed, but like just a little ruffled, and I'm like, what happened here? It was not sex. I'm sure of that much.
They had a pillow fight.
It's so fucking funny. That's another thing I'm gonna see if I can find a link to, because that's just it fucking cracks me out every time I think about it.
Oh my god.
That's so funny. Like, how do they get away with airing stuff like that?
I don't
know.
If
I was sitting on the board of editors for a TV series and something like that came up, I'd be like, just cut it. Cut the whole fucking scene.
Yeah. You're speaking nothing but facts, Maddie. Oh my god. I would look at thing. If I guess this is a good transition into what we're going to be talking about next, but if anyone ever petitioned me to write a sex scene in my series, I might commit like a very stupid crime. Like I'd probably shoot a confetti gun at them. I don't fucking know. But yeah, I think having discussed everything with stories from other places, let's now just round out, or let's go to like the final discussion for the night, and that is how it how romance and love stories go into our writing. And I think like because Alex, Gabe, and I have a lot to talk about in regards to our stories, I'll actually let Maddie go first, unless she wants to, because Maddie, have you been working on a novel recently? Because if it's mostly just been like shorter stories, then I think that's a good way to that's a good way to talk. Because with us three, there's so much fucking shit to talk about.
I am not a novel writer, so I will definitely go first. I'm short fiction, and I will say it. I do not write romance at all. I stay right clear of it because I feel my writing is, well, first it's just like a little bit, I don't know, it's a little darker. Like love doesn't really fit into the subject matter. But I like to write about the moments of life that feel a lot more fleeting than love. I feel like, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I feel like love is such a focus in everyday life. It's all you talk about with your friends, or like, I don't know, if you have a boyfriend, you're always talking about your boyfriend, or to your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. And I don't know, I just steer clear of it. I feel like it's talked about too much. I feel like it's always overdone. I feel like there's so many special parts of life that don't involve romantic love. So
yeah, to build on to that, I guess there's just more to talk about in terms of relationship dynamic that doesn't involve romance, which is what I've been trying to explore with Zeno, in particular, Porter and Magna. And I've said this before in previous podcast episodes, but just to say it again, Porter and Magna were childhood friends to lovers, then lovers to exes, then I think exes to friends, and that's where they currently are as of the story.
And Dean, sorry to cut you off, but how far in are you approximately?
Into the novel?
Yeah.
I think around halfway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted context because I sometimes get confused. So yeah. Yeah,
that's fair. So, the thing is, though, I only mention Porter and Magna's history of being exes, or of having been romantically involved fleetingly. I don't mention it, or I don't try to build on it so often, because primarily I don't think that's the point. the point of the dynamic that I'm exploring at the time, the dynamic I'm exploring is two friends who love each other so much, trying to accomplish their goals, right, and confide in each other despite despite the difficulties they've had. And that, I think, like, exploring the relationship exploring the relationship after a relationship is interesting. Like, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about, like, not communicating with exes and whatever. And while I kind of echoed that sentiment, I also want to see just how far I can take it. And with Porter and Magna's relationship, it is very I like to say it's very complex, but, like, there is a lot to it, really. Like, I've been trying to play on the fact that there have been very toxic highs and lows into it, especially, like, at the peak of their relationship. A lot of aspects that's what am I trying to get at? So, like, when I do have more time to flesh out their relationship and kind of give myself the time to do that, I think that's when I'm really excited for, because like, in my head, Porter and Magna have not had an amazing relationship. I think it's been toxic at some points, and I want to be careful with how I approach that kind of toxicity, because obviously, with the market that I'm reaching towards, I want to set a good example by nature. But with that in mind, I think it's been interesting trying to explore romance between two queer characters as a queer man, especially. It's I can't obviously write from the perspective perfectly from a queer woman, so, like, I've been trying to do my best to understand it, or to understand and write it to the best of my ability. So that's interesting, and learning learning the similarities, differences, should there be any within queer relationships. Like, I'm very interested in exploring that with Porter and Magna, and I think with other relationships too, because, like, there are two prominent semi-romantic relationships within the series. One is Porter and Magna's, the other one is between a couple other characters that I can't get into because spoilers, but all of them are queer, and yeah, I don't have much else to say on that because I'm kind of rambling at this point. But
I'm excited to read your novel, Dean.
Thank you. I'm excited to finish it.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
Oh my god.
It's hard to look at One Piece for forever.
I've been working, like, so come the end of this year, I would have been working on it for almost 6 years.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and it's kind of obvious when my writing style has changed. So, like, the first half of the novel will be reflective of my work in, like, 2018, and then somehow there's, like, bits from my 2020 knowledge in there, and there's like bits from my 2019 knowledge in there, and, like, the editor that it's gonna have to, like, pick up that copy and be like, dude, what the fuck, why are there so many inconsistencies here? And I'm, like, shrugging my shoulders, crying, breaking down, being like, please just take the book, I've worked so hard.
Isn't that just fun, the life of a writer? And sorry not to get too far off on a tangent here, but I do applaud you, novel writers, because I've said it before, staying invested in your characters and discovering them and, like, discovering a relationship between them, you have to be committed. You have to be in your own committed relationship with your characters.
Yeah. I have to agree with that, but let's hear from said novel writers now. I think let's start with Alex, because Alex, oh my god, you have a multiverse to play with, man. Oh man, I can't imagine the relationships you've had to balance.
Yeah, for me, it's not like I don't like writing romantic relationships, but I like writing relationships in general, I guess. It's that like relationships I find really interesting to write, be that like romantic and sexual relationships or like friendships or like family relationships in general. So that's like that tends to be the focus of a lot of my stories. So I guess if we're just gonna focus on like romantic relationships in general, or like specifically, I can just like skip over Diamond Dagger because the romantic relationships in that are not relevant. They are minor background relationships. I mean, like not that they don't affect the story, but they're not the focus. In Crown Upon My Head, May does have a love interest that she gets with at like probably I think in the second book probably is the plan right now. And they're like childhood friends to lovers, but there's like a gap where like they knew each other as kids and then they like lost touch and then they met again as they were like becoming adults and then got together. And I think their relationships interesting. It kind of starts out kind of shakily because like May is in a new situation that she doesn't really know what to do with. But then she finds out that she has this person that she knew at some point, and it kind of provides like a stability for her, or like a point of stability for her, and helps her kind of like find her footing in this new world, as it were. And then from there, it kind of builds. It's again, it's like having a foundation before the relationship starts has always been something I really like. I also want to talk briefly about characters I don't think I've talked about on here before, which is in
exclusives.
Ooh, yeah. And I have a story in the works. I don't know at this point if it's going to be one novel or multiple novels. In my head, I kind of refer to it jokingly as like my Game of Thrones equivalent story because it's a really, really big cast and takes place over like a large like area of land. And it starts like kind of spread out, but then in the end they all come together.
So it's nothing
but
new from what we know about you, Alex.
Shut up! Oh my god. Most of my stories take place in like one location.
I'm just
this
teasing.
is an exception. But no, there's these two characters in this story named Tempo and Mars, and they are they're basically found they basically meet. Mars is like on the run from his home and ends up getting like really severely injured. And Tempo finds him and kind of like him and his family kind of like help nurse Mars back to health and stuff. And at first they kind of have like this weird dynamic going on where Tempo's kind of scared of Mars, or not like scared of him, but like scared of what he represents, like is worried that it'll hurt his family and stuff. But they kind of start building this like mutual trust, and then end up together, and then they have to kind of like navigate their relationship in like the middle of what becomes a sort of war. And I think they teach each other to like embrace themselves really well. At least like Tempo is a character that struggles with a lot of things, and Mars is someone that manages to help like coax him out of his shell a little bit. And they're just, I really like their relationship, and I like their characters a lot, and I like their arc. Yeah, they're one of my favorites for sure to write about.
Ooh, cute. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, so that's kind of my two big ones, I guess.
All right. Should we close off with Gabe then?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I've never really talked about this series on the podcast. I've touched not the series, this book on the podcast. I've touched on it lightly, but this is as good a time as any to start like talking about Lemonheart. So oh God, totally lost my train of thought for a second. Hang on. So Lemonheart is the story of this teenage boy living in a post-apocalyptic wasteland who I have mentioned this part on the podcast before. He's basically a like chronic masturbator and porn addict. There's this whole like aspect of him being he basically lives in like a village in the middle of absolute shit nowhere. It's just a frozen hell, and his entire code is based on a porno collection that he's just like. And when this gets stolen, he goes on like a mission of vengeance to get his porn back, and that starts off as like this sort of weirdo quest. But that's mostly the jumping off point. I just like to have a weird like a pitch, but that's mostly the jumping off point. Where the story like really kicks off is when he meets up with this group of people who call themselves the Wasteland Devils, who are led by a girl named Fever. And Dune and Fever, over the course of the story, while he's sort of learning about the wasteland and learning about the world, him and Fever have this sort of weird relationship because they live in like this. It's basically 200 years after nuclear war has ravaged the planet. There's almost nothing left of like old world civilization, so people don't really have a frame of reference for how to exist in the world. And so a lot of their relationship is sort of figuring out like how relationships work. Like neither of them have like a frame of reference for how to understand that. So a lot of their relationship is sort of like downtime in the story. And like one of the things that I thought was super important for how I wrote their relationship in the story was that I didn't want it to feel like I didn't want it to be that one character was just like a catalyst for another character's arc. That's something that I've noticed a lot with fiction, that like, especially with love interests and romance, that like a love interest will basically just be introduced to be like a sort of an accessory to another character's story arc. So I wanted to have that was a big thing for me with romance in my stories. I don't like having romance where it's just romance for the sake of romance. So a big part of like Dune's story in this world is like it's kind of it's like a weird coming of age story, but like very violent and very dark. And a lot of that is sort of discovering like and sort of figuring out like what love and sexuality are from an actual perspective, and not like this very high what would you call it, high stimulation, like the very like as it is like the pornographic way of doing it that's in a lot of media. That Dune is basically that's his only frame of reference and his only way of understanding it. So a lot of the story is like him like figuring out that like the way that he's sort of learned how this stuff works from old world or media, as they call it, it's basically just not how it is, and like he has to really grow up and start to and like understand the world and how the world works and how people work. And this relationship is like it's a part of that. So it's not like I don't want to say it's a romance story, because that's a part of it, but it's not like Fever very much has her own story in the book. She has her own arc. She's basically the leader of this rebel faction against this group called the Appalachians. God, I fucking lost my train of thought again. Hey, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, I felt it was super important that I didn't make it like I didn't have a bigger focus on that part of the story when like the actual plot was what's important.
Right.
Makes any sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I guess to like close this off completely, or like at least the main portion of it, I think like what is so fascinating about romance stories is just what it does to us.
Mhm.
as people. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't always have to be romantic, but like when it comes to love and romance, it really just unlocks a whole other way of thinking, right? Like, for creative people like us, like, it's fun exploring those dynamics, but also just watching it through, TV shows, movies, books. Love really does just hit different, whether you're on the more positive side of it, so like when things are going good versus when things are getting really, really bad. It just unlocks more emotions that, maybe not always for the better, but like, yeah. What do you guys think on that, actually? On, I guess, what I had just said on how love and romance unlocks a lot for storytelling.
Yeah, I wanted to say, Maddie, earlier you said you think that love is something that's written too much about, like romantic love and stuff, and sex, which is something that I definitely agree with a lot of the time. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like the fact that people like it so much, the fact that people write about it so much kind of says like there's really something like essentially human about it that like keeps drawing us back to it over and over again.
Yeah. Gabe?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know that I have like anything super deep to add to that, but like basically, I think there's something. I think there's something that just compels people to like to write about it. Like if they're writing a story, like a big fictional story, like there's something that just compels people to like have that in there at some point. I think that's why a lot of stories like have what almost feels like an obligatory romance, because it's like, sometimes when you're a writer, you just can't help yourself. You need to have like you just feel the vibes, and you just need to get that in there.
Yeah.
And sometimes obligatory does feel obligatory for a reason. Like a lot of Hollywood movies feel very
Can get pretty
obligatory.
egregious, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Maddie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that romance and love is always revisited because who is a storyteller if you have no one to tell your stories to? And someone who's so deeply and genuinely cares and sees your heart and soul for what it is, and to go on all those adventures with you and to share the most intimate pieces of your life with. I think that's why it's always revisited, is because I don't know, it's just special to have someone to share everything with. Life stories.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself, I think. And I guess with that, let's close up for the night. So thanks everybody for listening in. As always, you can find our social media both individually and as the Ink Guild down below. Maddie doesn't have social media, unfortunately, so you're going to, I don't know, need to send like a fucking carrier pigeon if you want to communicate with her. I think for a closing segment, because we had been so positive, it's always fun to trash on shit. So let's, I'll give everyone like maybe a few seconds to think about one particular aspect, of a romance story, be it a specific story or trope or ship, whatever. And we'll each give each other time to trash on it. And because I already know what I'm going to talk about, I'll go first. Stop fucking putting in sex scenes in YA books. Like right fucking now. That's disgusting. Just don't. I really don't feel the need to elaborate that you should not be doing that, especially very especially very vivid ones.
Especially if your characters are minors.
Oh yeah. And please don't. Stop it. Who wants to go first?
I have a good one.
All right.
Not necessarily a good one, but Fuck 50 Shades of Grey. I hate that. It encompasses all the worst parts of romance. Fuck their toxic relationship. That's all. And if you search out love like that, then go to jail. That's all.
I approve this message.
I second that message too. All right, Alex, do you have something?
I was gonna say, stop with like. This is another thing that I find is really prevalent in YA, but it's not only in YA, but it's like unnecessarily forbidden romances. And I know I spent like a bit of time trashing on Cassandra Clare last episode, but like she's a particularly egregious example of this. There's one in like all of her series. In the first series, it's, oh no, they might be siblings because, incest is always a great storyline. In another one, she literally makes up some contrived plot reason that they can't be together. Like, it's just like, if you're gonna have a forbidden romance between a straight white het couple of the same like socioeconomic class, don't.
Period. That's all.
Period. All right. Gabe, what do you got?
Okay, this is more of a movie thing than a book thing, but it really fucking irks me. And on the topic of obligatory romances in Hollywood, just a message to all Hollywood writers and to all people who want to become writers and are basing a lot of the stuff that they're going to be writing based on Hollywood movies they like. Having your fucking characters talk a couple of times one-on-one and then kiss during the climax that's not a fucking romance arc. You can't fucking speedrun this shit. This is not. You can't just have like main character A and supporting character B have a few offhand conversations and then suddenly kiss at the end of the movie and say, "We did it, guys. We did it. We got a love interest in the movie." I may or may not be looking at you, Captain America: Civil War. Lots couple weird hang-ups with that movie too. With him, second tip: don't have your main character make out with his dead girlfriend's niece for lots of reasons that should be obvious, but apparently weren't.
All right. Good night, everybody.